Recap. Tonight, we're talking about positive classroom culture. We're talking about advocating for yourself as a student teacher because you might have to have some hard conversations. Um, we're going to talk about advocating for students, looking at our own implicit biases so we don't have those pop up in the classroom. And I do have a link that I'll share with you later on during tonight's session. And there's a few more resources. A lot of the resources that I received there from let me see. Oh, hi. Oh, thank you, Michelle. I was like, what's this? Um, there are a lot from Edutopia and from one of my favorite podcasts, The Cult of Pedagogy. So we'll be sharing some of those later on tonight. Hello and welcome. Hello, Riley. Great to have you here. Anna and Denise. Good afternoon, Marissa and Matthew and Nina. Wonderful to have you all here. Welcome to our last week together. And I'm loving seeing these results. Just looking at the pre-event poll about being prepared for equity in the forefront of teaching practice. Looks like most of you feel very prepared for that, which is fantastic. Advocating for yourself, that can be a little tough. Looking at implicit bias, it looks like a lot of you kind of feel in the middle there, somewhat prepared. All right. And thinking about your own teaching philosophy and personal values. Yeah, I see a lot of you feel very prepared for that, which is wonderful to see. I'm going to try to get those poll numbers up a little bit more. So if you just joined us, welcome to week 3, our final week of our student teacher boot camp. We're looking at more of a holistic approach here. We're looking at your own values as an educator, setting that positive classroom environment tone, looking at implicit bias, and challenging our implicit bias so that doesn't creep up in the classroom. And then we're also looking at advocacy for yourself as a student teacher, kind of getting prepared for some of those tough conversations. Oh, fantastic. Loving seeing these poll numbers go up. Great. Hey, Starshine, good to see you again. All right, so just like usual, let's go through some of our housekeeping things, and I'm going to close out our poll for tonight. Well, no, never mind. I made that really big. So a couple of housekeeping things. Remember, you can please keep your microphone off. You can pop in questions, comments in the chat. The smartest person in the room is the room. We can all build upon each other's experiences and ideas. So please share if you have experiences or ideas that can help support our learning experience tonight. If you would like, you can turn on your camera. If not, it's okay. And also, we have our recording on. we turned that on earlier tonight, so we have that ready to go. All right, I'm going to go ahead and end that poll. Let me go ahead and end that. And now I'm going to make my presentation large screen so we can all see that. Oops, sorry, wrong button. It was bound to happen. All right, there we go. And now we'll click present. All right, how are we looking there, Michelle? Looking good? We see everything? Awesome sauce. All right. Hello, whoever came on. It's great to have you back. All right, so tonight is our final boot camp night. It is wonderful to have you all here tonight as our final boot camp. Before we jump into our new content, if you wouldn't mind opening up the chat and sharing one takeaway from either our first session or our second session. Have you been here for all 3 sessions? That is fantastic. So I'd love to see one takeaway from one of the other sessions that you attended, either session 1 or 2, and drop that in our chat. And if you've attended all three sessions, could you pop a 3 in the chat just so we can see? I'd love to see that. I see a lot of familiar names. All right, Denise has been here for all three. Yeah. Oh, Marissa. Yeah, that is a fun saying, right? I do have that in my living room. Wherever you are, be all there. Anna's back. And oh, Marissa's back. Sorry, I saw two notes from you, Marissa. Fantastic. Yeah, it's really important to remember where you are. So whenever you're at school, you're present there. Whenever you're with your family, you're present there. Oh, awesome. Nina, that's so cool. I'm glad you're checking out the different ed tech tools and looking at Google for Education. That's a fantastic resume booster to add. And you also learn a lot of cool stuff. Love it. All right, fantastic. All right, I'll keep checking in on that chat as we go throughout tonight. Again, please add to it as we go if you come up with some great questions, ideas, or examples as we go tonight. So again, my name is Dr. Sam Fecich. This is not news to any of you. It looks like all of you have been here for our last 3 sessions here. I'm an instructor at Slippery Rock University, soon to be associate professor at Slippery Rock University in the fall. I'm very excited about that. I'm the author of EduMagic, a guide for pre-service teachers, and EduMagic Shine On, a guide for new teachers. And Crush It from the Start, 50 Tips for New Teachers. You can find them all over on Amazon. I'm also the host of the EduMagic podcast, a podcast just for future teachers. Last week, an episode went out with some motivation and tips for success for student teaching, where I shared a little bit about some of the things I've talked about here at the workshop. But I shared my #1 tip last week, which was no one expects you to be perfect. I had a call with one of my student teachers earlier in the week, and she goes, I'm teaching my first lesson. I am super nervous. I said, take a breath. It's okay. You're going to learn from this experience. You're going to learn what went well. You're going to learn what you can improve upon. And guess what? No one expects you to be perfect this first time around. And you're going to think back during week 4, week 8, even week 16 to your first lesson that you taught today. You're like, wow, I have really grown so much from that. And that's what this is. Student teaching is a learning experience. You're playing the role of a student, you're continuing to learn, and you're playing the role of a teacher, a professional educator. So embrace that, truly embrace that. All right, and you can find my work over on sfecich.com, and I would love, love, love to connect with each of you over on Instagram at sfecich after our session today. So a quick reminder, mark that calendar. Guess what? Same time next week, but a little longer. We'll be hanging out for our 90-minute virtual workshop about landing your dream teaching job. We are talking from resume and cover letter to job fairs to where do I find the jobs? I feel like everybody else knows where they are, but I don't know where they are. We're going to look at different job board options. KDP has a wonderful resource for that. We're going to be looking at interview questions and the interview process. I remember going into interviews thinking, okay, what do I expect? This is a first round. Is this a screener interview? Is this a second round demo? What do I need to prepare for a demo lesson? So that is next. Yeah, it's February. Wow, when did February happen? It's next Wednesday at 5:30 to 7 o'clock. And yes, it will be recorded just in case anyone would like to ask about that. And you can sign up with the QR code. And maybe somebody will drop the link in our chat, or maybe they already have. All right, let's keep going. So just a quick reminder on that. All right, so here's our agenda for tonight. We're going to talk about equity in the classroom, recognizing and addressing implicit bias. And I have a resource I'll share in the chat for that. It goes to an Edutopia article about 5 keys to challenging implicit bias. Advocating for yourself as a student teacher effectively, building that positive classroom culture. And that kind of builds upon our conversation about classroom management, and then creating a lasting impact. And I think this last one is going to be where a lot of us add some ideas, because I'm sure we can remember one of our favorite teachers that had a lasting impact on us. So I'd love for us to kind of channel that energy and share in the chat what are some ways that you can create that lasting impact as a new teacher and as a student teacher. Even though you're in that placement for, say, 8 weeks, 10 weeks, 16 weeks, you do make an impact on the students' lives. So remember that as we go into that talk. So when we look at, we're going to be talking about equity first, and when it's important for teachers to be aware of societal changes and adapt them to provide quality education for every student in their classroom. So let's boil that down. It's really important that we as teachers stay up to date and current with diversity, equity, inclusion practices in our classroom spaces, so all students feel valued, supported, welcomed, and seen in our learning spaces. I love walking into classrooms where we see students who want to be there. They want to learn because they feel that love from the teacher. That space that they've created is a welcoming and supportive space in that classroom. Whether it's from greeting them at the door to giving them a high five on the way out, those students feel supported from entrance to exit. And we as teachers need to provide that for our students so they can learn and have that quality education. So I would love to pause here and I want you to go ahead and drop in the chat. What is one way a teacher has helped you feel seen, welcomed, or supported in the classroom? So I'll go ahead and type that prompt in our chat. And so what is one way a teacher has made you feel welcomed and supported in the classroom? And thank you, Michelle, for popping the link to the dream of landing the dream job. And welcome to someone who just popped in our room. It's great to have you here. So we're working on the question in the chat. What's one way a teacher has helped you feel supported, welcomed in the classroom space? Oh, I love this, Nina. So starting with strengths and supporting where students might struggle. I love that. And then going back into the strengths. It kind of reminds me of that hamburger method, right? Where we start with strengths and then we get to some supports. How can we support our students that are struggling? And then we end with our strengths. Oh, Starsheen, that's a great question. I was thinking of it from the perspective of you as a student. So what has a teacher done to help you feel supported or welcomed? But if you would like to take on the role, like thinking about it from the teacher perspective, what's a way you can help students feel supported and welcomed? You can totally do that. That's a great clarifying question. Thank you. And I'm going to come back to our chat and I'm going to go ahead and show, why is this important to be thinking about equity in the classroom space? So research has shown that there is disproportionate numbers of students based on race and gender when it comes to in-school suspension or like where the students are pulled out of class and they need to go sit like in the principal's office, whatever that's called at your school, typically in school suspension or out of school suspension. So they show that there's a disproportionality between students based on their gender and their race when it comes to discipline and discipline referrals. Mostly male Black students have more referrals than their counterparts who are white. So being mindful of that and knowing that, it's also kind of plays a role whenever we get to know our students and student norms and student behavior. So knowing our students, knowing what their norms are, and just building that community within our classroom space. We also know that there's disproportionate numbers in special education, males and females across different races, from gifted to learning support and intellectual disability. So making sure the students who are receiving special education and special education related services actually need those services. So when we're evaluating students, making sure it's in their native language, we're using multiple assessment pieces because one of my colleagues shared earlier today, I think this is beautiful. Assessment is like a puzzle. You need lots of different assessment pieces to see the whole picture of the student. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's brilliant. So just like when we're evaluating for special education, using observation, anecdotal data, standardized tests, if needed, depending on the diagnosis, medical information, observation from different teachers in different environments. So it's important that, again, the students in special education need those services and that they're receiving them. We want to make sure that they're, you know, getting access to the content and to the curriculum. And then this also has a lot to do with implicit bias and teacher mindset. So I'm just going to go ahead and minimize my screen very quickly, and I'm going to link in a, there we go. I'm going to pull in a link that goes to one of my favorite articles in Edutopia. Just give me a minute to scoot down my Zoom stuff. You know how it is whenever we open up new tabs and we got to move Zoom around. That's like the hardest part. There we go. And then I'm going to go ahead and on this. There we go. So I popped in the link to this let me scoot this chat, 5 keys to challenging implicit bias. And implicit bias are, biases you have as a teacher that you may not know that you have. So it's important to take a look at them. I'm going to go ahead and scroll up a little bit and check out our chat. I love how you guys are sharing about encouragement, inclusion, teachers noticing you. I notice looking disconnected, feels seen. Yep, having students feel seen, students with IPs remain patient and creative. Yeah, I love that. Thank you for sharing that. So in this article, go ahead and scroll through it a little bit. 5 keys to challenging your own implicit bias. So here it talks about what is it, and I'm going to minimize our chat. There we go. So implicit bias refers to attitudes and stereotypes that are unconscious of people's perceptions, actions, and decisions. I highlight it here on our website. You can also open it up in your own as well. And I want you to think about, and if you feel comfortable sharing in the chat, please do. If not, that's fine too. But I want you to think about and reflect. How does implicit bias play a role in your content delivery, in the way that you show up and interact with students? Remember, excuse me, it refers to attitudes and stereotypes that unconsciously affect our perceptions, actions, and decisions. So maybe that means taking a step back and reflecting and thinking about what you're going to say before you jump in. Maybe that means take a beat and try not to take a comment personally. So it's really important that we kind of, phrase this as we're going to continue to improve as teachers, and knowing what our implicit biases are is going to help us with that. And there are, see, here we have our disproportionate pieces about discipline and special education, talking about teacher mindset and beliefs. And when we think about implicit bias, this is one way to overcome those mindsets and beliefs that might be based on stereotypes or inaccurate information. So here we go. Here's some ways to kind of be aware and interrupt your implicit biases. I like to think about this. Are you approaching this scenario based on facts or based on feeling? Because sometimes our emotions can play a big role in that. So when we think about, I love how the author starts off here. Pause and think. What are my biases for this person? How can I disrupt my autopilot thought so I can generally see and listen to them? So being aware and replacing your biases that you have that are, not intentional, but they're there, with receptive, affirming thoughts and factual information, not based on our feeling. So everybody has implicit bias. Let's learn about how to pay attention and close those gaps. So in this article, he mentions a few blog posts and podcast episodes to check out. And I would highly recommend this part for number 5, tuning into implicit bias at your school, whether you want to think about it at the college level or at student teaching, and be thinking about, especially this first question, where do I see implicit bias playing out in the school? Do you notice it? Do you notice it within your classroom? Do you notice it within different spaces? And then the last question, what I like here, is how can I be an ally to those and really think about my own biases? So I hope that was helpful. Oh, yeah, Starshine, this is a great point. Let me go ahead and open up that chat. Learning our students and being aware of their culture and values may differ from your own. Absolutely. That's an excellent point. And I think that's one way to kind of get started in thinking about um, those implicit biases. Sorry, I'm trying to turn the page and talk at the same time. It wasn't working well for me. All right, so let me go ahead and present and click present. So again, just reiterating that when we approach an implicit biases and doing some of that reflection based on attitudes and stereotypes, knowing that we need to replace that immediate thought with factual information and really see and hear the person, the individual in front of us. So I hope that that was helpful. So how do we overcome some of these implicit biases? Well, first, let's be aware. And there are implicit biases assessments you can find online and be thinking about, how does that play a role in your teaching and your content and the way you design content, the way you deliver it, the way you assess students, the way that you design your classroom management strategies. By being aware, you're really tuning in to being in the moment with your students and taking that step back and really seeing them as their individual, as an individual. Um, so really getting to know them. We talk about that's classroom management 101, right? That's not a silver bullet. It's not going to fix everything, but it is something getting to know our students, building that community of learners, building those relationships one-on-one with our students helps us to see them as individuals and building that trust, respect, and rapport. Something that's talked about throughout the Charlotte Danielson framework for teaching in domain 2 is your classroom a space of respect between students and between teacher and student, or if there's classroom aides as well, that would be included. Is it a place of rapport where students can voice their opinions without feeling, I don't know, should I say that? Can they disagree? Can they agree to disagree? I think would disagree politely and still acknowledge what that person has said, but disagree in a yeah, I think in a polite way. I don't know if polite's the word I want to use, but in a mature way. How about that? Depending on the grade level of our student. Um, so that environment of respect and rapport is something that's evaluated for teachers and between students and between the teacher and the student. And then having those learning routines, those expectations of learning with our students, those policies and procedures. Do they help support student learning? Do they help support student growth? Does it help students maybe even to help come up with some of those policies and procedures, those classroom norms? To help the day go smoother. So these are some things to be thinking about when it comes to implicit biases and then seeing our students as the individuals as they are. Because we know when the student walks in that classroom, they're more than just the student in our class. They have family, they have friends, they have extracurriculars, they have things that they enjoy doing, and everybody is different. So just keeping that in mind. So I have up here one of my favorite, did I say favorite? Podcast episodes from the Cult of Pedagogy. And it's episode 188. You can see it down there at the bottom of the screen. So I want you to think about there are 8 questions to uncover implicit bias. This is a great one to start with. There are other implicit bias screeners, but and I have one linked here and I'll put it in our notes here. But I want you to think about and maybe just scroll through or just look through a few of these questions. I kind of really like number 8, how much cross-cultural literature, TV, movies do you consume? This would also include YouTube, Spotify, music, that type of stuff. Who's on your free pass list? I think this one's interesting. Being more forgiving of students we like and agree with. That for me speaks to high expectations. So when we work with our students and say we have a student come late to our class, oh, that just happened, it's okay. Or do we want to have those high expectations for every student? For every student that comes in late, hey, I'm really glad you came to class. Let's try to be here on time. Here's what you missed. And having kind of like that procedure in place for ourselves. So we have high expectations for everybody. And number 3 is another one I like to think about. How often do you use generalizations? Like, they or those or them. I think that's another really important thing to reflect upon and consider. You don't have to type anything in the chat, but these are some really nice questions to reflect upon to uncover some implicit biases. And then do the work. Do the work to think about how diverse is your personal circle? How diverse are you exposing yourself to different media, cultural media, literature, and YouTube and Spotify and all that stuff? And really take the time to do the work to invest in yourself so you can be an even better teacher. And then another comment over here and another sticky note to the right says, how often do you use generalizations? This one's really interesting. I recommend like taking some time throughout the week and think about how often do I use generalizations whenever I'm referring to other people, and think about and just put a little tally. And how can you change that? Think about generalizations and how that affected your content delivery. How did that affect your classroom management? Like, are there certain groups of students like, oh, I got to teach that class today? Instead of, I get to teach that class, I get to introduce them to this really cool topic, and I'm going to use this really engaging hook to try to start it off. I don't know how well it's going to go, but I'm going to give it a try. So changing that mindset and changing that perception. So I don't want you to put your answer in the chat, but I want you to go ahead and put in the chat, what's one of these questions, 1 through 8, that you're like, okay, I'm going to do some work on that specific question. And while you guys are working on that, I'm going to just minimize my screen so I can pull up that link that I have here. Oops. And of course, I skipped ahead because, you know, that's the way things are. Okay. All right, there we go. So I put the link to that blind spots survey from the Cult of Pedagogy in our chat too, along with, you know, previously the Edutopia article. So if you're looking to like save some of these resources, there's a few to check out. So I encourage you this slide to do the work, to show up and do the work for yourself and for your students. So I'm seeing, you know, I need to think about who's on my free pass list. Yeah. And I think that again goes hand in hand with high expectations for all students. Yeah, starting learning how diverse our students are. Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing in the chat. I really appreciate that. I think that's a nice way to kind of reflect and think about the content. So if you'd like to share, go for it in our chat. And I'm going to flip to our next slide. This one will be a little interactive if you're feeling comfortable with that. Go ahead and just scoop my Zoom up a little bit. Okay, I'm ready. All right, so this slide really has you thinking about how do you define yourself? And we're going to talk about in terms on the next few slides about advocacy. When I heard one of my colleagues share with her class, thinking about how we define ourselves, and oftentimes as teachers, we immediately say, I'm a teacher. I'm a teacher. Guess what? I'm a teacher. And yes, there's something in teachers. We are so proud to be educators. We get to bring up that next generation. We get to support their learning. There's so many amazing things about being a teacher or an educator. But I want you to try to go beyond that and think about what are some ways you define yourself besides your name and your aspirations as a teacher. So what are some other roles you have? What are some other interests you have? What are some outside influences that you have that affect who you are and to how you define yourself, your values and your perceptions along in the world? So maybe just name like one of those in the chat if you like. Yeah, Marissa, going back to the previous slide, who you define as others or not, or yeah, or using us versus them. Yeah, excellent. And Marissa, just reading that out loud kind of made me think like us versus them, like teachers versus parents, when really it's more of a collaborative. Like, how can I, instead of dealing with parents, how do I work with parents? And so changing that mindset around even the vocabulary that we use. I really like that, Marissa. Thank you. Let's go ahead and look at our next question, which is how do you define yourself beyond your first name and your career as a teacher? What are some defining aspects that you have? And go ahead and drop that in the chat. Maybe just one. I know, right? It is a tough one. So for example, let me try some examples here. So for me, beyond my first name, which is Sam, I think Samantha is way too formal, and maybe one day I'll grow into it. Um, and my career as a professor, one way I define myself is by being a mom and by being a wife. I was going to say a Christian. Yep, Marissa. Uh-huh. So like thinking about other aspects of yourself. I love that, Nina. I'm an artist. That's beautiful. Fantastic. And then each of these aspects define who we are and how we present ourselves, right? Advocate. Ooh, Maria, that's such a great word. I'm loving that. And coach, that's a fun one. When I think that's a fun word because for coach, that means so many things to me. Does that mean like a coach, like a teaching coach, like you're helping support teachers? Is it a coach, like an athletic coach? Um, maybe it's academic games. I don't know. That sounds really fun. I love this. This is excellent. So remember, whenever you're defining yourself and whatever terms you're using, those are all part of you. We are more than our career. And I know it's hard to say and it's hard to hear, but yeah, we're more than our career and we need to continue to invest in ourselves and those other aspects in our lives. So that's where it's important to advocate for yourself by setting boundaries around your time and continuing those interests. Like someone shared that they're an artist, continuing those interests as you are as a teacher. I'm sorry, in addition to being a teacher. I love that. And a sister, that's wonderful. Yes, wonderful. And then we're not going to answer this question, but just reflect on, what events in your life have influenced this sense of identity or how you define yourself. Is there something that happened in your life where you felt really proud to define yourself as an advocate, a mom, an artist, a coach? So just something to think about and hold on to that. Because as teachers, we are in it to win it for our students, right? We're like, we need to advocate, we need to get these services, we need to make this sure that students accessing the curriculum on a way that best suits them. But we also need to advocate for ourselves. So you heard me say earlier, focus on feelings, facts versus feelings. This is something I like to, continue to go back to because it can relate to so many different things. So when you're advocating for yourself, when you're feeling, oh, this just doesn't feel right, or you're getting that pit in your stomach, you're like, I don't know if we should be doing this, just that little voice in your head. Take a minute, take a breath, think about, of course, take into account your feelings because feelings are valid and you need to take a moment to feel them. But then I want you to reflect on the facts. What happened? What are the facts of the situation? Because sometimes we can intertwine those facts and those feelings, right? And maybe it did happen like that, but we're feeling that way. Oh, well, that wasn't as bad as I thought it was, or it wasn't as bad as it was in my head, or whatever it might be. So first reflect on your feelings. Make sure that you know that they are valid feelings. Every feeling is welcome. And then reflect on those facts. If there's something that's happening as a student teacher in your classroom, go to your co-op. Keep those communication lines open, because you don't want to create that tension in the classroom. It's awkward for everybody. You can feel it, they can feel it, maybe the students can feel it, but bring it to the attention of your co-op, and just come at it honestly and practice how you're going to approach a specific situation. Now, if it's something that's going on with you with your co-op and you're like, I don't know about this, loop in your college or university supervisor. They're there to support you as well. We are here as a college university supervisor. We're here to support you and to support your co-op. We want this to be a successful opportunity for you. So please keep us in the loop as well. Practice what you're going to say and document. If you can document any emails or any written correspondences, make sure you document that as well. And then if there's something where you need to meet or have a third party meeting of some sort, if you can, meeting in person is great, because you don't have those weird awkward silences like in a virtual meeting. You can see the person's body language. You can hear their tone of voice. You can really listen to what they're going to say without interrupting, and really hear what they have to say and respond. Um, and then please make sure that you articulate any challenge or difficulty that you might be having. And again, that you practice that and you brought some materials to support that information. You're not just based on feeling, that you have some facts to support you. And don't just wait for someone else to come up with a solution. Maybe come up with a few on your own. And I know that this is like, it might sound a little drastic, but there might be times in your student teaching experience where you do have challenging situations. Some that might be related to students, but you might have to advocate for yourself as well. So just, I think the biggest thing here is keeping those lines of communication open. If you're going to approach your co-op, practice what you're going to say, have documentation, clearly articulate what's going on, where you see a challenge or a rub, and then have some solution ready to go, and how, excuse me, how you can move forward from the situation. And again, keeping your college supervisor in the loop. So advocating yourself is so important. Please don't just think, oh, it's okay, I'm only here for 3 more weeks. If it's a situation, if it's something going on, you need to let somebody know. And be prepared to have that conversation. Hold on 1 minute. Sorry about that. So we're going to move from like to some positive vibes here. I think we need some of that. So when we think about creating that positive classroom culture, that place for respect and rapport, it directly relates to burnout and classroom management and discipline and all those types of things, managing student behaviors. And when we look at the burnout rate, it's very high. I'm sorry, I don't have specific numbers for you now. Maybe one of my KDP friends can pull that up in the chat. But we do know that teachers are leaving, and post-COVID, it's even more. Teachers are leaving so much. And the reasons that they most cite that they're leaving is discipline referrals, lack of support from administration, classroom management, student behavior, all these types of things, among others, as to why they're leaving. So I think one way to approach this would be through building that positive classroom culture in our learning environment. So again, we kind of talked about this in previous sessions. Excuse me. But building those relationships with our students first and foremost. This is not going to fix everything. This is not going to be the thing that prevents behaviors, but it's something that we can build upon when it comes to building our classroom culture and having it be a space where students are welcomed and supported. Knowing our policies and procedures, setting up that routine of expectations. That's why as a student teacher, when you're taking over the classroom and teaching your content, it's so important that you know that teacher's classroom management, because that's what the students are going back to whenever you leave in 10 or 16 weeks. So the teacher needs to be able to pick it back up easily. Knowing that those classroom management strategies and techniques have logical consequences. So it's not like a 0 to 60, like you get one warning and then you're in the office. You need to be thinking about what are the logical consequences for a specific action, and really do the work to think about, if this happens, then what? And for some classes, coming up with a class rule or class expectations, having a class, I think it's like a class agreement where the students help to develop that information. How do we treat each other in this class? How do we approach each other? How do we support each other? So having students come up with that as well. I love this one of providing positive praise in public. So praising students around each other. And then if a student needs redirected, doing that in private. We don't want to embarrass or draw attention to some behaviors, because sometimes behaviors might be for attention from the whole class. So we need to be aware of that. What's going to work well for each student? When we're providing positive praise, I think someone shared earlier, like a strength, a struggle, and a strength. Using that, like in our feedback and in our targeted instruction. I love how you're doing this. Let's work on that. And here's another positive piece. Keep going with this other aspect. Being aware of your body language, your tone, your facial expressions, because your face can say a lot. Maybe your voice isn't saying it, but your face can say a lot. When you're documenting any student behaviors or classroom management strategies, make sure you have a copy, both whether that's printing out, the documentation, or having it saved on your OneDrive or your Google Drive. When you're saving digital documentation, making sure that they're password protected, because you want to protect the student's information as well. And that, like, if it's a document that's shared between you and a special ed teacher, that it's set with appropriate permissions. Another fantastic strategy is to reach out to families. I recommend the first week, if you can, the first 3 days of school, for every single student in your class, pick up the phone and say something positive that student did. This might be the very first phone call that family gets about something positive that their student did. And it needs to be genuine, but that sets that positive tone. So if something does happen, their first phone call from you isn't, we got to have a meeting, or so-and-so did this today. It's that positive, hey, we're on the same team. Let's support this student in the classroom together. Here's something I noticed about your student that went really well today. For some students, like for our middle school friends, they love to be social, right? So in your content design with that classroom community and culture aspect, thinking about that with our upper elementary and our middles, thinking about how can I embed maybe one think, pair, share into the classroom space, or maybe a really quick SEL activity. We're measuring the temperature of the room, we're seeing how students are doing, we're having them share something, and then we can get back into content, because they're going to want to talk to their friends and not about what you're teaching. So give them opportunities to be in community with one another. All right. Another really fun one I like to think about, and this one, it does take some work, but I think it really does drastically change your mindset and how you interact with students. So a 5-to-1 ratio, 5 positive to 1 negative. I think this is really interesting. So you want to think about the interactions you had with your students. Maybe pick 4 students in your class. Have positive interact and like document, like, how's my interactions? Are they mostly positive, or are they negative? Are they neutral? Kind of be tracking that. And if you notice, oh, I'm really kind of negative to this one student, I didn't even realize that. That's going to help you with your classroom management, with that culture, and with that community. And maybe you start adding in some more positive phrases and the way that you address the student, your tone, the vocabulary that you use. Also checking in with students. This one is so important. And I know it sounds really basic, but doing a quick check, how are we doing today? And having an anonymous poll where they do smiley faces, from like angry face to meh face to the happy face, and just checking in and seeing how they're doing. You can also do ones where it's it doesn't show their names, but it just like public on the board, it doesn't show their names, but you see who answered each one. And you can see for the students who answered meh or angry face, You can check in with them privately. Hey, I noticed you put a tired face. Did you get some good sleep last night? How can I help you stay engaged in today's lesson? So you can check in with them privately. It's also really important. One other thing I wanted to pull out here is to not I'm trying to let me just read off screen and I'll continue on. Separate the person from the behavior. So separate the individual from the action that they're doing. I think that's really important. So you're addressing the action or the behavior. It's not you did this, it's let's work on this behavior. Let's work on this calling out behavior or getting up and moving around the classroom. For right now, I need you to sit and focus, and I'm going to set a timer up here and let's see how well we do. Or you need to stay seated for 5 minutes as we go through our morning warm up or whatever it might be. So they have a clear expectation of what you want to see. And then you can reinforce, I know you can do this. Let's see how you do. And maybe you adjust that timer as the student needs it. And doing those check-ins is going to help you with that as well. I always love coming at a behavior from the perspective of how can I help you? What's going on today? How can I help you? Instead of, listen, you are not paying attention in this class. What's going on with you? See how the tone is a little bit different, coming up alongside them as a guide and supporting them. So I hope like thinking about like our tone and our intonation. Oh, I love this Starsheen sharing about how you check in on everyone individually. Yes, I see you. I love that Starsheen. Yeah, absolutely. I see you. Perfect. All right, let's keep rolling here. There were some other things on that slide, but I am running a little low on time, so I want to get through everything tonight. So thinking about how you handle behaviors, what we know that with different teachers, we can tolerate different things and different behaviors might I don't know if bug us is the right word, but might impact their teaching more than other teachers. So thinking about what are your non-negotiables in your classroom and what are they like, okay, it's not that bad. It's all right, I'll deal with it. So for example, like when I'm doing a think, pair, share, and I'm having my students come back and share in the large group, and I still have a few students talking or whispering, I'll instead of being like, all right, let's bring it back to the large group and then immediately call on like 3 students, I'll do something like, all right, let's bring it back to large group in 3, 2, 1. And by that time, all the whispering is done and we're ready to share. And I usually say, I'm going to call on 3 people I haven't heard from yet today, or I'd love to hear 3 volunteers who I haven't heard from yet today. So it sets that expectation. And then we don't have the little whisperings after when it's time to be as a large group. And I feel better about that. So a strategy I built in to help us focus in. Another one I want to pull out here is expectations instead of rules. So instead of classroom rules, having classroom expectations, maybe the students help create them and they practice those expectations, but having them framed in a positive way instead of don't, having them phrased in a positive way. We respect others instead of, I can't think of an example right off the top of my head, but having positively phrased classroom expectations, no more than 5. If students can help come up with them, awesome. That's always a great strategy. And then reteaching them, especially after breaks. It's okay if we need to go back and reteach those strategies and those techniques and expectations in our classroom. All right, so this is one of my favorite ones. And this one I hope we can add to this list. So whenever you're thinking about your teacher legacy, and yes, it is a legacy, you are going to hear from students that you had last year, that you will have, that you had 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, whether that is through message on social media, or maybe somebody dropped a little note under your door, or they just stopped by to say hi. Those mean so much to us as teachers. You're going to hear from students and you're going to know like what, oh, I made an impact on that kid. That's awesome. And for some, you're not going to know it all. And that's okay too. But I highly recommend as a teacher that you have a little drawer where you keep all those positive notes that students write you, the drawings that they do for you. Because when you have those hard days and you question, why am I here? Why am I being a teacher? Why did I choose this profession? You can go back and look at that lasting impact that you made. So I'm going to pause here and I want you to go ahead and drop in the chat when you think of your most impactful teacher, what's something that they did that made that lasting impact? Maybe they helped you and supported you when you were struggling with something going on with family or friends. Maybe they gave you that extra help because you just weren't able to get that one math problem or that one technique, but they were able to break it down for you and they stayed after class and helped you with that. Maybe it was just their whole vibe in their classroom space where you wanted to be there. And when it wasn't your class period, you went there during study hall because that person made you feel valued and respected and supported. So I want you to be thinking about that person. I would love to see it in the chat if you would like to share, but I'm going to keep rolling here because of time's sake. But I will keep the chat. I will head on back to the chat in a little bit. So as a teacher, I challenge you, what do you want to be remembered for? What do you want your legacy to be? And I think this is really important as we think about our interactions with students. We can never know what that student is going to remember about us and the interactions that we've had with them. I'm sure you can pinpoint one example of that impactful teacher, something that they said, something that they did, how they made you feel. Like that is it. But you can also think of other teachers where they did not make you feel that way. So you never know what a student's going to remember about you. Let's try to keep it a positive legacy. And I know that we're all going to be able to do that. And one way to do that, again, this is just a nice recap of all of our sessions that we've done today, these past few weeks. Consistency in our expectations, consistency in our learning environment. So students know when they know what we expect. They know our structure, they know our routine. That helps to build trust in our learning community and that respect and rapport. Active learning, getting students involved, going beyond that textbook, maybe bringing in a guest speaker, going on a virtual field trip, providing lots of different types of literature for them to interact with and explore, doing hands-on activities, having them do breakout EDUs or escape rooms in your classroom related to content, having them create something and use their critical thinking and their creative thinking skills, having them collaborate and do some group projects if they're comfortable with that. Another way to make a lasting impact with our teaching legacy is to reflect. As teachers, we're always going back and thinking about, oh, I could have phrased that better, or maybe I should give this example, or you know what? I think I'll ask ChatGPT to help me outline these guided notes for my students because it's taking me way too much time, but I can give them this presentation. And now I have a great resource for my students that takes me no time to do, but I'm able to focus on the relationship aspect. So being open to trying new things and to reflect and to adapt. Building those strong relationships. Again, really hearing our students, seeing them as individual people, and being cognizant of our own implicit biases and doing the work to undo them. Being passionate and enthusiastic. Yeah, you might not be on fire to teach every single topic in your class, but you can still set that tone of positivity and passion and enthusiasm in your classroom space. I love it when I have an 8 a.m. or 9 a.m. class and I'm like, Monday morning, let's do this. I got music playing, greet students at the door. I'm so glad you're here. Welcome back. How was your weekend? You know, all those types of things. And then we get into our content, which I might not be super excited about, but I'm excited that they're there and we're going to talk about it together. Setting those high expectations. Again, going back to implicit biases, setting high expectations for all students, making sure all students can have access to your curriculum, access to the content in a way that best suits them and their learning experiences. I love this one because I love to say as teachers, we get to keep learning. So learning doesn't stop when we cross that stage of graduation. It is actually just beginning. We get to keep learning. We have this whole professional development community from KDP Convo to podcasts, webinars like this one, blog posts, journals, so much we can do to collaborate and continue our learning as professional educators. And then being a role model for our students, being a role model for ourselves and for our younger selves, right? Be the teacher that you wished you had. I think that speaks volumes to how you value your students and how you value yourself as a teacher. as a teacher, it can be really hard to not focus to focus on the stuff that maybe didn't go so well today or things that could have gone better. But I challenge you to celebrate those successes, jot them down. You might think you remember them, but jot them down, celebrate them. This student finally got their double digit addition with carrying over. This student did amazing on their spelling test because we worked on it every day this week and we tried some different strategies with them and they finally got it and it was awesome. I am so proud of them. And then lastly, we want to create that environment, a theme we've talked about all throughout our session, where students are valued, supported, welcomed, and seen. I'm going to go ahead and open up that chat. Oh my gosh, I love this, Maria. I think that's a great connection to our last one there. I want my students to know that I'm a safe place no matter what they're going through. For them to know that I will help every way I can to help them succeed. Yes, absolutely. I love that one. Oh, Marissa, I love how you shared about the teacher that was so kind and helpful. These are beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. So I challenge you to jot down, what is your teacher legacy? What do you want it to be? What's your student teacher legacy? What do you want students to remember about you as a student teacher? I'm sure you can remember a student teacher you had. I remember my fifth grade student teacher, and he did a unit on the solar system. And we all got to choose a planet and talk about it. That's what I remember about my student teacher, but it's something different than just reading from a book. So we got to talk about a planet that we researched. All right, friends, I want to thank you so much for joining us these past 3 weeks. It has been awesome. I'm going to go ahead and share out that post-event poll. And I'd love to open up to any questions, comments, concerns, compliments, drop them in the chat. And then one last thing we have here, don't forget next week, we're doing our Land Your Dream teaching job session. It's February 5th from 5:30 to 7. You can register the link somewhere in the chat. I saw it pop up. Or you can grab that QR code. And we're going to talk about cover letters, resume, job board, job search, job fairs, all the job things, how to prepare for an interview. Oh, letters of recommendation. What's the difference between a letter of recommendation and a reference check? Like what are those things? How do I do those? And how to ask for one in a professional way. So we got a lot planned for next week as well. I hope to see you here. Oh, thank you, Christopher. I appreciate you being here as well. And then I think I'm going to end on what, let me go ahead and scroll up. I keep scrolling a little bit. There we go. I think I'm going to end on what Nina shared in the chat. I want to be a fun and inspiring educator who makes kids feel excited to come to school. I love that, Nina. That is so fun. Remember that you do have a legacy as a teacher, and I know you all are going to do awesome. I wish you the best of luck during your student teaching experience, and please reach out if you have any questions, comments, concerns, you want to give any, if you want to bounce any ideas, I am happy to help support you. Again, you can find me over on Instagram, and I'll drop my email in the chat as well. Let me just go ahead and do that. There we go. And we got our poll going. Awesome. All right, friends. Hopefully I'll see y'all next week. If not, thank you so much for attending our 3-part workshop. I hope it was helpful for you, and please reach out. We are here to support you. KDP is an amazing organization to help support student teachers, but they also help support new teachers and first-year teachers too. So don't forget about that. Whenever you cross that stage of graduation, they also help support our first year and new educators. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Thank you, KDP, for hosting, and maybe I'll see you next week. Bye for now. Thank you, Anna. Oh, thank you, Maria. You're so sweet. Great to have you here. Thank you, Marissa. Have a great night.